Hi, welcome to Building Resilience and Moving Forward, a webcast presented by the Regional Learning Center. My name is Kieran, and I'm a community educator at the Regional Learning Center, and I use the pronouns she and her. In this webcast, we will be speaking about what resilience is and how to build it. We will also look at what you and your agency will want to consider as you look to move forward during the time of the pandemic. As we know, measures have been put in place by the government to help stop the spread of the COVID-19 virus, and these measures have really turned our lives upside down. Our home lives have been impacted as we've seen changes to our daily routines and norms, and our ability to see our family and friends has also been restricted due to physical distancing. Our work lives have been affected too. In-person visits and programming have transformed to the online world where staff are now connecting with clients and their families via phone and video calls to check in and provide support. And so when these measures were first introduced in March, they really tested our ability to be flexible to all of these changes. And now, as the situation continues to develop, we're faced with changes almost on a daily basis, forcing us to continually adapt to a new normal, which is testing our ability to be resilient. And so, what exactly is resilience? Resilience is your ability to bounce back from difficult life experiences or challenges using your strengths, skills, and resources to come out stronger on the other side. It involves looking at and coping with challenging events in a different way so that you're able to see past the stressful situation to keep functioning both physically and psychologically. It's important to note that people who are resilient don't ignore what's happening in their lives. They acknowledge the stressful situation that they're in and work through it in a healthy way. People with resilience also still feel all of the emotions of their challenging situation. So they still feel pain, anger, grief, frustration, but they work to process these feelings in a healthy way so that, again, they're able to move past the situation. Resilience also isn't a magic wand that makes your problems go away, but it can give you the ability to see past them so that you can find enjoyment in your life and better handle stress in the future. The good news is that you can learn to be resilient by looking at your behaviors, thoughts, and actions, and we'll talk about exactly how to do that on the next slide. It's also important to note that building resilience takes time. It means that you have to make an effort every day to work on building resilience in yourself. It's doable, but you need to make a commitment to do so. And so when we reflect on the pandemic, we can appreciate just how stressful the past few months have been. It's really tested our ability to cope with change. And as the situation continues to develop in the upcoming weeks and months, we know that more changes are coming. We will have to continue to be flexible as we work to adapt to a new normal. And in order to cope with this, we want to ensure that we're well equipped and build resilience within ourselves now. And so, how exactly do you build resilience? The American Psychological Association highlights 4 areas that you want to focus your resilience building efforts. And these 4 areas are social connection, wellness, purpose, and thought processes. As we discuss each area, you may notice that you are already doing some of these strategies, which is great. Some of these may be new to you, and that's okay. It's all about learning how to build resilience. And some strategies may be easier to implement than others, but just remember this takes time and practice. The idea here is that you want to approach building resilience in a very holistic way by addressing all 4 of these areas. The first area that you want to focus your efforts is social connection. So this involves staying connected with your family, friends, and your community, because these are the people that are going to provide you support, the ones that you can share your concerns with, and that can make you feel like you're not facing your challenges alone. It's important to stay connected with your family, friends, and community, whether that's through small gatherings while practicing distance or using technology. You also want to foster wellness. and this specifically refers to self-care, mindfulness, and coping strategies. We've heard lots about practicing self-care in the past few months, and for good reason. Tending to your mental, physical, spiritual, and psychological health can help put you in a better position to deal with life's challenges. And so hopefully you've been practicing self-care in the last few weeks and months. And if not, it's okay. It's not too late to start. You also want to practice mindfulness, which means checking in with yourself and being self-aware. During times of stress, it can be really easy to make sure everyone around us is doing well, that we forget about ourselves. So it's important to check in with yourself, become aware of your thoughts, feelings, emotions, and body sensations in a non-judgmental way. Remember that you can be affected by what's happening too, and it's okay because you're human. There's lots of ways to practice mindfulness, including by doing online meditations and deep breathing exercises. You also want to look at your coping strategies, as some strategies are only helpful in the short term, but can actually lead to more problems in the long term. An example of this is turning to comfort foods when you're stressed. Sure, eating cookies and chips make you feel better in the moment, but is this really a long-term solution? And so take a moment to reflect and consider if there may be a more productive and healthy way that you can manage the stress in your life. You also want to consider purpose. Helping others can give you that sense of purpose and help you remember that there are things in your control during this time. Helping others can also offset feelings of worry and stress, so all the more reason to reach out and help. You also want to honor your feelings and experience. As we discussed under wellness, it's important to connect with yourself and become self-aware. As you start to do this, you may notice that you have feelings of sadness, anger, or grief. It's important to acknowledge, process, and work through these feelings with compassion and self-love. So don't judge yourself for how you're feeling, and remind yourself that it's okay if you're affected by the situation. You also want to develop realistic goals. Goal setting can help you stay motivated and give you a sense of direction. You can set a goal really about anything. It can be small goals, it could be a larger goal that you want to work towards, whatever that looks like for you. You also want to look for opportunities for self-discovery. When we're faced with stress, we can learn a lot about ourselves. So take time to look back and reflect over the past few months to see if there's anything that you've learned about yourself. This could be as simple as recognizing that you turn to food to cope or that you've grown in some way. The idea here is that you get to know yourself better. You also want to look at thought processes. Keeping things in perspective is important, especially because our thoughts play a significant part in how we feel and how resilient we are when we're faced with obstacles. So you want to think in a way that keeps you feeling hopeful and less distressed. You can do this by reflecting on what you've learned from the situation, looking at what positives have come out of it, taking things one step at a time, and focusing on what's in your control. You also want to turn negative thoughts into more positive ones. So this involves becoming aware of your thoughts and questioning if they're rational or if they make any sense to shift them to more positive ones. So there's a saying that change is the only constant in our lives. And reflecting on the past few months, it's safe to say that we've lived the saying firsthand. And as we look ahead, we know that the next few weeks and months are going to be very similar. They're going to be full of change as the situation continues to develop. And we know change is stressful, especially now because we don't know what things will look like as we move forward. And so to mentally prepare and better cope with these upcoming changes, you want to acknowledge that change is coming. Even if you don't know what things are going to look like or how or when they will change, doing this can prepare you for the upcoming changes. It's also important to maintain a hopeful outlook and stay positive. And you can do this by reflecting on what's going well for you, keeping a gratitude journal where you write what you're thankful for, reminding yourself that this is a temporary situation, and remembering not to take things too seriously and keeping your sense of humor. There have been some funny moments that have come up over the past few months, such as when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau talked about speaking moistly, which got turned into a music video on the internet. It was pretty funny. And this is not to minimize how challenging the last few months have been for people, with loved ones becoming ill or dying. Rather, it's just reminding ourselves that it's okay to laugh if something's funny. You also want to reflect on your strengths and past accomplishments. You've likely overcome a lot to get where you are today. And so look back at what you've overcome and reflect on what got you through those situations. What strengths and abilities do you have that you can use now? And doing this helps increase your self-confidence because you can think to yourself, I made it through those situations, I can make it through this too. So when it comes to building resilience, it's important to ensure that you're considering all four of these areas. Again, some of these you're already doing, which is great. And as for the ones that are new, some will be easier than others. Just remember, it takes time and a daily commitment to build resilience. One activity that you can do to help start your journey of building resilience is called the Finding the Silver Lining activity. The goal of this activity is to change your outlook on negative situations or experiences by looking at the bright side. And the way this works is you start by listing 5 things that you find enjoyable in your life. Think about what gets you out of bed in the morning and what gets you excited each day. These could be simple things like a fresh cup of coffee, your dog or cat, or hearing the birds chirping outside, whatever that looks like for you. So once you've listed those 5 things, you're then going to reflect on a time when something didn't go well for you. It could be something that happened recently, but it should be a time where you felt angry, upset, or frustrated. You're then going to describe that situation briefly in writing, and then reflect on that situation and try to find 3 positive things that came out of it. And so let's consider an example. I think we can all agree that technology is great when it works, but is terribly frustrating when it doesn't. And so let's say you have a virtual visit with your client, but you run into issues with your computer and your internet, and you end up being late to the visit. So what are 3 positive things that we can identify from this situation? So one could be that you were able to eventually connect with your client and still have some of the visit. 2, that you solved your technology issues yourself and may have a future in IT support. And 3, that you remembered to center yourself and let those feelings of frustration go before you connected with your client, so it didn't impact your interaction with them. And so a really simple example, but you can see how the activity works. And the idea here is that we're trying to retrain your brain to look at the bright side. As humans, our automatic reaction when we're in a challenging situation is we start to self-criticize, judge, and complain. And by doing this activity, which should only take you about 5 or 10 minutes every day for 3 weeks, you can actually rewire your brain to look at the positives. It's a simple activity, but it can help start your journey towards building resilience. And it is linked below this video, so be sure to take a look. I encourage you to try it. And so now that we've talked about how you can prepare to move forward during the pandemic, we're now going to consider what your agency will want to look at moving forward. As we know, the government has a stepwise plan for opening businesses and services over the next few weeks and months. Even though we don't know when community health services will be given the green light to resume in-person care and programming, we can appreciate that there will be a lot to consider when it's actually time to open. And so it's important to start having these conversations with your team and your leadership about how care will be provided. We don't know the exact measures agencies will have to follow once they are allowed to open, but we can assume that requirements for physical distancing, screening, hand hygiene, face masks, and limiting the number of people in a space will still have to be followed. And so as your agency looks to move forward, you want to consider if and how in-person programming and services will be offered. There may be some services your agency can't offer anymore due to space or staffing. And so you may have to modify certain programs to ensure that distancing and other safety measures are being followed. You also want to think about how staff are going to be moving back into the building or office space. So thinking about the number of staff that you can safely have in a space at a given time. And looking at how team meetings will be held, whether you have space to hold in-person meetings or whether they'll still have to be held virtually. And also looking at how staff and clients will be screened before they enter the space. You also want to think about how physical distancing will be practiced in programs, and if this will affect the number of clients that you can accommodate. You also want to ensure that there is signage in the space that reminds people to practice distancing. Also consider if cleaning supplies are available and how surfaces and equipment will be cleaned. It's important to note that there is a difference between cleaning for dirt versus cleaning to disinfect, and this is something you may need to train your staff to do. Agency policies and procedures regarding disinfecting also need to be finalized and communicated to staff before your program opens. So there's lots to consider when it comes to opening up and offering in-person programming and services, and it's important to start having these conversations now. It may feel like you can't really do anything at this point to prepare because we don't know what's going to be expected. But there are small steps that you can take now to consider the options and possibilities in order to position your agency to be ready to open. As your agency begins to discuss opening and moving forward, you also want to consider how to best support clients and caregivers through these upcoming changes. We can anticipate that some clients and caregivers may not feel comfortable with in-person programming and services, and this could be for any number of reasons. It's important to practice patience, empathy, and understanding, and to reassure clients and caregivers that their safety is your agency's top priority. You can do this by clearly communicating to clients and caregivers what measures your agency is putting into place to keep them safe. It's important for them to know that you haven't forgotten about COVID-19. Caregivers and clients may also ask to continue receiving care virtually, and you'll want to have discussions with your team to consider if this would be a possibility after you resume in-person services. Clients who have cognitive impairments may require additional support transitioning to in-person programming as well. And so to prepare for and to ease this transition, you'll want to ensure that you have the most up-to-date information about the client. And you'll also want to speak to the caregiver about any concerns that they may have related to restarting in-person care. Again, lots to consider when thinking about how to best support clients and caregivers during this challenging time. Through team discussions, you may find that there are initiatives that you can put in place now to better prepare staff, clients, and caregivers for the transition. We've included this poster as an example of the kind of signage you can post around your agency to remind everyone to practice distancing. The poster also tells visitors that your agency hasn't forgotten about COVID-19 and is doing everything they can to keep everyone safe. This poster comes from the City of Toronto and is free for download online if you're interested in posting it in your agency. So thank you for watching this webcast. Hopefully you've learned how to build resilience and what your agency should consider as we move forward in this pandemic. Below this video, you'll find a link to an evaluation, which is very quick to complete and only takes 5 minutes. So please take a moment to let us know what you thought of this webcast and of any other topics you'd like to see in the future via a webcast or webinar. As I mentioned earlier, there are also additional resources about resilience and moving forward linked below. Be sure to take a look. And if you have any other comments or questions, feel free to connect with us at the Regional Learning Center. Our contact information is listed below as well. And with that, I thank you again and stay safe out there.